The night was darker than usual, but for little Alina, darkness was nothing new. She was barely 10 years old, yet her eyes had already seen enough cruelty to last a lifetime. She sat quietly in the corner of her uncle's small house, her thin arms wrapped around her knees, her stomach aching from hunger. The smell of food floated in the air, but none of it was for her. Her uncle Salim and his wife Farzana were laughing loudly at the dinner table with their 2 children. Plates full of steaming biryani and kebabs lay before them, while Alina had been given a stale piece of bread and a glass of water. "Why are you staring?" Farzana snapped when she noticed Alina's eyes wandering toward the food. "You should be grateful we even let you stay here. Orphan children don't get luxuries." Alina lowered her eyes quickly, her cheeks burning. Her parents had died in a car accident just months ago. Since then, she had been dumped here like unwanted baggage. Salim, her father's elder brother, had agreed to take her in only because of the small inheritance her parents had left. He managed the money, but Alina never saw a single coin of it. Instead, she was treated like a servant. That night, while the others slept, Alina crept into the kitchen. Her tiny hands trembled as she picked up the leftover scraps from the plates. She ate in silence, her tears mixing with the taste of cold rice. From the hallway, a voice hissed, "Caught you again, thief." It was her cousin Asan, who was just 2 years older than her. He smirked as he grabbed her wrist tightly. "You're nothing but a beggar, Alina. My parents say you're cursed. That's why your mom and dad died." His words stabbed deeper than knives. She wanted to scream, to tell him he was wrong, but her voice froze in her throat. Instead, she pulled away and ran back to her tiny mat in the corner. That night, she didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, whispering to herself, "I'll prove them wrong. One day, they'll regret every single word." Days turned into weeks, and the mistreatment grew worse. She was forced to clean the house, wash dishes, and run errands while the other children went to school. She had once been a bright student, but now books were forbidden to her. Whenever she tried to sneak into the study room, Farzana would slap her and call her greedy. One rainy evening, Alina overheard a conversation that broke her heart even further. "Why do we still keep her?" Farzana asked her husband. "She's useless. Once the inheritance money runs out, she'll be nothing but a burden." "Don't worry," Salim replied. "I've already spoken to the orphanage. We'll send her away soon. Better to be rid of her before she grows up and starts asking questions about the money." Alina pressed her hand against her mouth to stifle the sob. The inheritance money, that was why they had kept her. Not out of love, not out of responsibility, but greed. That night, as thunder roared outside, Alina sat by the window. Her reflection stared back at her, thin, fragile, and hopeless. But deep in her eyes, a spark had awakened. It was small, but it burned with determination. "If no one will protect me," she whispered to herself, "I'll protect myself. If no one loves me, I'll learn to live without love. But one day, I'll make them pay." The day finally came when she was dragged to the orphanage. Salim didn't even say goodbye. He signed a paper, handed her a small bag of clothes, and walked away without looking back. The orphanage was crowded and noisy, filled with children crying, shouting, and fighting. Alina stood in the doorway, clutching her bag tightly, feeling smaller than ever. A kind nun, Sister Mary, placed a hand on her shoulder. "You'll be safe here, child," she said gently. "Don't be afraid." But safety didn't erase the wounds carved into her heart. Each night, as she lay on the hard bed among dozens of other children, she remembered her uncle's mocking laughter, her aunt's cruelty, and her cousin's insults. She remembered the inheritance money that was stolen from her. She remembered the betrayal. And with every memory, the spark inside her grew stronger. She began to work harder than the other children. She cleaned, studied, and fought for every opportunity. While others played, she read old books from the orphanage's dusty shelves. She memorized every lesson, every word, as if it were her weapon. Years would pass before she realized it, but that was the night her destiny changed. Alina, the unwanted orphan, was gone. What remained was the seed of a woman who would rise from the ashes, a woman who would build an empire, a woman who would return for revenge. Life in the orphanage was harsh, but compared to the cruelty of her uncle's house, it felt like a strange kind of freedom. At least here, Alina wasn't constantly insulted or slapped for existing. Here, she blended into the crowd of forgotten children, another face in a sea of broken souls. But unlike the others, Alina carried a secret fire within her. She wasn't just surviving, she was waiting. Every night while the younger children cried themselves to sleep, Alina lay awake under the flickering bulb, clutching a tattered book she had found in the orphanage's storage room. It was a collection of short stories, but to her it felt like a doorway. Words became her escape, her weapon, and her promise to herself. Sister Mary noticed it first. "You're different, Alina," she said one afternoon, watching the girl recite passages by heart. "Most children your age struggle with reading, but your eyes shine when you touch books." Alina lowered her gaze but couldn't hide her smile. "Books don't hate me, sister. They don't call me cursed. They don't steal from me." The nun's heart ached at the bitterness in such a young voice. She placed a gentle hand on Alina's head. "Then, hold on to them, child. Education is the one thing that can never be stolen from you." From that day, Sister Mary became Alina's silent protector. She slipped her extra notebooks, found her old pens, and convinced the orphanage headmaster to let Alina attend the local school. The first day at school was terrifying. Alina arrived in a faded uniform that barely fit her shoes too tight, her bag an old sack stitched at the corners. Other children whispered and laughed, but when the teacher asked a question, Alina's hand shot up with confidence. She answered flawlessly, her voice steady, her eyes blazing with quiet determination. By the end of the week, even the bullies stopped laughing. She had earned her place, not through wealth or appearance, but through brilliance. Years passed in that rhythm. Study, work, survive. Alina became the star student, winning small scholarships that kept her in school. She worked part-time cleaning classrooms and tutoring younger children, every penny saved carefully in a small tin box hidden under her bed. But no matter how far she rose, she never forgot her past. Sometimes at night, she dreamed of her uncle's house. She saw the lavish dinners, the cruel smirks, the stolen inheritance. She would wake up with her fists clenched, whispering the same promise. "One day I'll return, and when I do, they'll bow their heads in shame." By the time Alina turned 16, she was no longer the frail little girl who had been thrown away. She had grown taller, sharper, her eyes glowing with a quiet strength. One evening, as she worked late in the library, she met a woman who would change her life forever. Her name was Nadia Rahman, a wealthy entrepreneur who had come to donate books to the orphanage library. She noticed Alina hunched over a thick business magazine, scribbling notes furiously. "What's a girl your age doing with such heavy reading?" Nadia asked, curious. Alina looked up, startled, but then smiled shyly. "Learning. One day I want to build something of my own, something big." There was a pause. Most children Nadia met usually dreamed of toys or comfort, but this girl, her eyes carried ambition. Nadia's interest sparked immediately. "Tell me," she said, pulling out a chair. "What do you know about business?" And Alina, nervous yet eager, began to speak. She explained how she had read about markets, companies, and investments. She spoke of ideas, of strategies she had memorized from books. For nearly an hour, Nadia listened, impressed by the depth of knowledge pouring from such a young girl. Finally, she said, "You remind me of myself when I was your age. Hungry, determined, unwilling to be crushed by circumstances. Tell me, Alina, would you like to work with me one day?" Alina's heart skipped a beat. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for, a door opening into the very world she dreamed of. "Yes," she whispered fiercely. "More than anything." From that day forward, Nadia became her mentor. She arranged internships, introduced her to seminars, and guided her in ways Alina could never have imagined. But Alina didn't just follow blindly. She absorbed everything like a sponge: finance, leadership, negotiation. She studied late into the night, often until her eyes burned. The other children at the orphanage teased her, called her the little professor, but Alina didn't care. She had a future to build. By the time she graduated from school, Nadia helped her secure a scholarship for college. It was a prestigious institution, full of wealthy students who looked down on the orphan girl with secondhand clothes. But once again, Alina silenced them with brilliance. Professors admired her. Classmates feared her sharp intellect. Opportunities that seemed impossible for someone of her background began to open. Still, Alina kept her past hidden. She never spoke of her uncle or the betrayal. She wore her pain like invisible armor, driving herself harder than anyone else. On the night of her 18th birthday, Sister Mary visited her with a small gift, a silver locket. Inside was a picture of her parents. "I thought you should have this," the nun said softly, "to remind you that you were loved once." Alina's hands trembled as she held it. She hadn't seen her parents' faces in years. Tears blurred her vision, but behind the grief, a sharper thought formed. "I won't just survive for myself. I'll rise for them too, for the life they wanted me to have. And when I face those who betrayed me, I'll do it with their memory shining in my heart." She clasped the locket around her neck, a vow sealed forever. The girl who once cried over scraps of food was gone. In her place stood a young woman ready to carve her destiny. Her rise had begun. College had opened doors Alina had only dreamed of. The classrooms were vast, filled with sharp minds and sharper ambitions. Most of her peers came from wealth, their lives cushioned by family businesses, luxury cars, and connections that stretched across industries. Alina had none of that. But what she lacked in privilege, she more than made up for in fire. Every lecture was war. She took notes feverishly, challenged professors with questions that even seasoned students couldn't answer, and volunteered for projects that others considered too difficult. Slowly, her name began to echo through the campus. The orphan prodigy, the girl who outshone even the elites. One fateful semester, a business competition was announced. It was prestigious, funded by multinational companies, and the winner would receive not only a large cash prize, but also mentorship from leading CEOs. For Alina, this was more than a contest. It was a battlefield. She poured every ounce of her soul into preparing. Day after day, she stayed in the library until it closed, drafting business plans, calculating risks, and studying global case studies. Her idea? A tech-driven marketplace designed to connect small artisans to global buyers. While her classmates dreamt of glamorous ventures, Alina thought of the poor, the forgotten, people like the ones she had grown up with. She wanted to build something that gave power to the powerless. When presentation day arrived, Alina stood on stage in a borrowed blazer that was a size too big. Whispers filled the room as students from powerful families flaunted their polished projects. "Who is she?" one girl sneered. "Probably here for sympathy points," another chuckled. But when Alina began to speak, the room fell silent. Her voice was steady, her eyes unflinching. She painted a vivid picture of millions of artisans trapped in poverty, robbed by middlemen. Then, with precision, she unveiled her solution, a scalable digital platform that could change lives while generating sustainable profit. Her passion was undeniable. Every word carried weight. Every statistic was bulletproof. She didn't just present a plan, she told a story, her own story hidden within. By the time she finished, even the judges leaned forward, captivated. When the winners were announced, Alina's name was called first. The hall erupted with murmurs. The girl who had walked in unnoticed now stood at the center, holding the trophy. For the first time, she wasn't just a survivor. She was a winner. Among the panel of judges sat Mr. Adrian Cole, a billionaire investor with a reputation for turning startups into empires. After the event, he approached Alina directly. "Young lady," he said, his sharp blue eyes studying her, "you remind me of myself when I was starting out. Hungry, fearless, dangerous." Alina smiled politely, though her heart raced. "I'm not afraid of hard work, sir. I only need a chance." Adrian's lips curved into a smirk. "Then you'll have one. I want to fund your idea. Let's see how far you can go." That night, Alina lay awake in her dorm room, staring at the ceiling. A billionaire investor wanted to fund her. She was standing at the threshold of a new world, the very world she had once only read about in magazines. But deep inside, her thoughts wandered back to her uncle's house. The same people who had stolen her inheritance, who had laughed while she starved. One day, she thought, one day I'll return not as the weak little girl they threw away, but as a storm they'll never survive. Months turned into years. Under Adrian's mentorship, Alina launched her startup. At first, it was a tiny operation, a cramped office, a handful of employees, endless nights of coding and planning. But Alina was relentless. She worked harder than anyone, often surviving on coffee and 2 hours of sleep. She pitched to investors with fire in her eyes, closed deals others thought impossible, and slowly her platform began to grow. Artisans from small villages joined. Products began shipping across countries. Customers praised the authenticity and uniqueness. Step by step, Alina's dream transformed into a reality. By the age of 23, her company wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. But success came with new challenges. Competitors tried to crush her. Media questioned her background. Rumors spread about her being too ambitious, too cold. Alina faced it all with quiet resilience. She had faced worse: hunger, homelessness, betrayal. Compared to that, business politics felt like child's play. And in the shadows of her success, she began building something else. A network of investigators, quietly gathering information about her uncle's wealth, businesses, and secrets. Her company gave her access to resources. Her connections gave her power. Piece by piece, she was preparing for the moment she had dreamed of since childhood. One evening, after a long day at work, Alina stood before the tall glass windows of her office, the city lights shimmering below. Her reflection stared back at her, not the scared orphan girl, but a woman carved out of fire and fury. Adrian entered the room, handing her a glass of wine. "You've done well, Alina, very well. But I can see something in your eyes. You're not satisfied, are you?" Alina smiled faintly. "Success isn't enough, Adrian. Not until I settle an old debt." He raised an eyebrow. "Revenge?" Her silence was answer enough. Adrian chuckled darkly. "Then make it worth it. Build your empire so vast that when you strike, the world will watch, and they'll never forget your name." Alina turned back to the city, her voice a whisper, but her conviction unshakable. "They took everything from me, but I will take more from them, not out of hate, but out of justice. They'll learn what it means to destroy a child's life." And with that, the path was set. The girl who once wept in the dark had become a woman who would bend the world to her will. The first step was complete. The next would be war. The years that followed were a whirlwind. Alina's small startup, once mocked as a charity project, had exploded into a phenomenon. Her platform now connected thousands of artisans across continents. Investors poured in millions, celebrities endorsed the products, and within 5 years, the company was valued in the billions. But Alina was no longer just a CEO. She was a force of nature. She sat in boardrooms where billion-dollar deals were signed. Governments invited her for trade talks. Her name appeared on the cover of magazines. The orphan billionaire, from nothing to everything, the woman who changed global trade. Yet behind the dazzling headlines, Alina's heart remained cold, her mind sharp as a blade. She hadn't forgotten the nights of hunger, the insults, the cruel laughter of her uncle's family. Their faces haunted her, fueled her, pushed her beyond human limits. One late evening, Alina sat in her penthouse office overlooking the glittering skyline. Adrian Cole, her mentor, was there again, sipping his usual glass of scotch. "You've done it," he said, his voice filled with pride. "From the ashes, you've built an empire, but I see that same fire in your eyes. You're not finished, are you?" Alina leaned back in her leather chair. "No. This was never just about success. This was about taking back what was stolen." Adrian studied her for a moment. "And how do you plan to do that?" Her lips curved into a smile. "I won't just take revenge. I'll destroy their foundations, the very ground they stand on. I'll make them beg for mercy." Adrian chuckled. "That's dangerous." Alina's eyes glinted. "So is underestimating me." The plan began in silence. She hired private investigators, forensic accountants, and cyber experts. Slowly, a map of her uncle's empire began to unfold. His businesses were rotten: illegal deals, hidden debts, corruption, and exploitation. For years, he had thrived on deceit, just as he had thrived on robbing a little girl of her inheritance. Now, Alina had the resources to expose it all. One by one, she bought stakes in companies connected to him, always under hidden names. Shell corporations masked her moves. Lawyers ensured secrecy. By the time her uncle realized competitors were circling him, Half of his empire already belonged to Alina. But she didn't stop there. She targeted his allies, bribed his partners, and lured his best employees away with offers they couldn't refuse. His once loyal circle crumbled, not even knowing whose invisible hand was orchestrating their downfall. Meanwhile, Alina's own empire grew stronger. Her tech company diversified into finance, logistics, and even media. With every expansion, she gained new tools for her revenge. She didn't just want him ruined, she wanted him erased. One evening, Alina received an email from her investigator. It contained photographs. Her uncle, Mr. Harris, now graying and heavier, sat in his lavish mansion surrounded by wealth stolen from her family. His wife wore diamonds that had once belonged to Alina's mother. His son flaunted luxury cars on social media. Alina's hand tightened into a fist as she stared at the images. Her chest burned, but she forced herself to stay calm. Soon, she whispered. Very soon. Her empire was now powerful enough to influence governments, to move markets. But Alina wasn't reckless. She was strategic. The first strike came quietly. Her uncle's import business suddenly faced legal troubles. Authorities discovered fraud in his accounts. News outlets, subtly influenced by Alina's media ties, splashed headlines about the Harris family's hidden scandals. Investors fled, shares plummeted. Overnight, the proud Harris empire was shaken. Alina watched it all unfold from her high-rise office, sipping coffee as if it were just another morning. This is only the beginning, she said to herself. At a gala event weeks later, Alina walked the red carpet in a gown that shimmered under the lights. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted her name, and the world celebrated her as a self-made billionaire. But across the hall, her uncle stood frozen. He hadn't recognized her at first. The last time he had seen Alina, she had been a weak, malnourished girl in rags. Now she was unrecognizable, powerful, graceful, commanding. Their eyes met. For a moment, silence roared louder than the music around them. His face drained of color, and Alina's lips curled into the faintest smile. Not a smile of warmth, not a smile of recognition, but a smile that promised war. Later that night, Adrian approached her. "You've revealed yourself," he warned. That was dangerous. Alina's gaze remained fixed on her wine glass. No, that was intentional. He needed to see me. He needed to know that the little girl he discarded is now the woman who holds his fate in her hands. Adrian smirked. And what's next? Alina's voice was like ice. Next, she said, I'll take everything he loves. Slowly. Piece by piece. Until he understands what true loss feels like. That night, under the city lights, Alina stood by her window. Her reflection showed not just a billionaire, but a predator, poised for the final hunt. The orphan girl was gone. In her place stood an empress of revenge. And the Harris family's destruction had only just begun. The jet touched down on the very soil Alina had escaped in tears. It had been almost 20 years since she had walked the streets of her childhood town. Now she arrived not as a helpless orphan, but as one of the most powerful women in the world. Her name had become a global brand, her empire stretched across continents, and her face was recognized everywhere. But here in this city, she was just a ghost returning to claim what had been stolen. The convoy of black cars rolled out of the airport, bulletproof and tinted. Alina sat inside the central limousine, her eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. Yet behind that mask, her heart raced. Every corner of the town was a memory. The bakery where her mother once bought her sweets. The schoolyard where other children mocked her tattered clothes. The alley where her uncle had slapped her for crying. Each sight poured fuel into the fire of her revenge. Her first stop was not her uncle's mansion, it was the gravesite of her parents. Alina stepped out, dressed in a simple black dress, without her usual armor of power. The wind whispered through the trees as she knelt before the headstones. "Mother, father," she whispered, her voice trembling for the first time in years. "I've returned. I've built everything from nothing. And now, I will make them pay for what they did to us." Her eyes glistened, but she wiped away the tears quickly. There was no space for weakness now. That evening, A grand charity gala was hosted at the city's elite club. It was the talk of the town, the orphan billionaire returning home to give back. Everyone who was anyone was invited: politicians, businessmen, celebrities, and of course the Harris family. The ballroom glowed with crystal chandeliers. Champagne glasses clinked, cameras flashed, and the orchestra played softly in the background. When Alina walked in, silence fell. Heads turned, whispers spread like wildfire. That's her, the billionaire orphan. She's breathtaking. She's richer than the entire Harris clan combined. And then, across the room, her uncle saw her. His face froze. His hand trembled on the glass of wine he held. His wife whispered something in his ear, but he couldn't hear her. His son, now a spoiled heir, sneered arrogantly, until he realized who stood before him. Alina met their gaze and smiled, a smile colder than winter. The speeches began. The mayor welcomed her, praising her achievements. The audience applauded, hungry for her words. Alina stepped onto the stage, her black gown shimmering under the lights. She stood tall, poised, commanding the room without effort. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice calm yet carrying weight. "I was once a child of this city, a child who had nothing, no wealth, no power, not even a family to protect her. But life has a way of shaping us. And I stand here today, not just as a woman of success, but as a reminder that the past is never forgotten." Her words lingered in the air like daggers. Her uncle shifted uncomfortably in his seat. After the speech, the mingling began. Alina moved gracefully among the crowd, shaking hands, exchanging smiles, and finally, face to face, she stood before the Harris family. Her uncle forced a smile. "Alina, it's been a long time." She tilted her head slightly, her eyes never blinking. "Yes, a lifetime, uncle." His wife's face went pale. His son tried to cover his unease with arrogance. "It's impressive," the boy sneered. "From rags to riches. Must have been luck." Alina leaned closer, her voice like velvet but carrying venom. "Luck had nothing to do with it. Survival did. Something your family never thought I was capable of." Her uncle swallowed hard. He could feel the storm gathering in her words. The days that followed were brutal, not with violence, but with power plays. Alina announced massive investments in the city. Factories, tech hubs, schools, thousands of jobs were created overnight. The people hailed her as a savior. Meanwhile, whispers spread that the Harris businesses were collapsing. Banks withdrew loans. Authorities began audits. Competitors surged ahead. And the cruelest part? Every deal, every investor, every bank pulling away from the Harris family had Alina's invisible hand behind it. One night, her uncle stormed into her hotel suite, desperate and trembling. "Why are you doing this?" he demanded. "We gave you shelter when you had nothing." Alina rose slowly from her chair, her gaze sharp enough to pierce through his soul. "You gave me shelter?" she repeated, her voice low and dangerous. "You stole my parents' fortune. You starved me. You beat me. You threw me out like trash. And now you stand here, pretending to be the victim." Her uncle's face flushed. "You don't understand." "No," Alina cut him off. "You don't understand. I was that little girl you left to die, and now I am the woman who owns your future. Every company you built, every dollar you stole, it will be mine again. And when I'm finished, uncle, you'll have nothing left. Nothing." Her voice echoed like a verdict. Her uncle stumbled back, his breath shallow, his face pale with fear. For the first time in his life, the mighty Mr. Harris felt powerless. Alina turned her back on him, dismissing him as if he were a beggar. The war had begun. But the final blow was yet to come. The sun was setting behind the Harris mansion, painting the sky blood red, like a prophecy of what was to come. Inside the mansion, the family sat around the dining table in silence. Gone were the days of laughter, parties, and servants bustling through the halls. The empire that once seemed untouchable now crumbled piece by piece. Debt collectors called daily. Newspapers splashed headlines of their frauds. Politicians who once courted them now avoided their name. And tonight, the storm had telephone coming to their doorstep. The heavy wooden doors opened with a thunderous echo. Alina stepped inside, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She was dressed in a fitted black suit, her aura colder than winter, sharper than steel. 2 bodyguards flanked her, but it was clear she didn't need them. Her presence alone commanded fear. The Harrises rose from the table, their faces pale. "What do you want from us?" Mrs. Harris whispered, her voice trembling. Alina's lips curved into a cruel smile. "Everything, and nothing. Let me explain." She walked slowly around the table, her fingers brushing against the polished wood, her gaze piercing into each of them. "You took a child who had lost everything," she began, her voice calm yet venomous. "You could have given her kindness. Instead, you gave her pain. You starved her, mocked her, beat her, and when she was no longer of use, you threw her away." Her eyes landed on her uncle. "Did you think I would forget? Did you think that little girl would die quietly in the dark?" Her uncle's fists clenched, but his voice cracked. We did what we thought was right." "No," Alina snapped, her voice sharp as glass. "You did what was easy, and now you'll learn what justice feels like." She snapped her fingers. From the entrance, several officials entered. Police officers, government agents, and lawyers carrying thick folders. The Harrises gasped. "These," Alina said coldly, "are the results of years of investigation. Fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion, illegal land grabs. Every crime you committed, exposed." Her cousin slammed his hand on the table. "You set us up." Alina leaned closer, her eyes blazing. "No, you set yourselves up. I just gave the world the truth." The officers began reading out charges. The family protested, cried, begged, but their voices were drowned by the sound of justice closing in. Her uncle turned to Alina, his face breaking into desperation. "Please, we're family. Spare us." Alina's expression didn't waver. "Family? Did you remember that word when you locked me in the cold? When you stole my inheritance? When you threw me out like garbage?" She leaned close, whispering in his ear. "You created this monster, Uncle, and tonight she's here to collect her debt." As the Harrises were handcuffed one by one, chaos filled the mansion. Mrs. Harris sobbed uncontrollably. The cousin cursed violently. Her uncle collapsed into a chair, his face drained of all power, all pride. Alina stood in the center, untouched by their misery, watching them fall the same way they had once watched her. But then, something unexpected happened. Her eyes fell on her younger cousin's daughter, a little girl, barely 7 years old, peeking from behind the curtains. Her eyes wide, innocent, terrified. For a moment, Alina saw herself. The child she once was, the orphan who had begged for kindness. Her chest tightened. She walked toward the girl. The child flinched, expecting cruelty. Instead, Alina knelt down, her voice soft for the first time in years. "Don't be afraid. You are not them. You will never be me." The girl's eyes filled with tears. Alina gently placed a card in her tiny hands. "When you're ready, come find me. I'll give you the life I never had." The officers led the Harrises away, their screams echoing through the mansion. The empire they had built on greed and cruelty crumbled into dust. Alina stepped outside into the cool night air. She looked up at the sky, stars breaking through the darkness. The revenge was complete. The ghosts of her past were finally buried. And yet, deep inside, she realized revenge had not healed her wounds. It had only balanced the scales. But perhaps in giving that little girl a chance, she had taken her first step toward something greater than vengeance: redemption. Alina entered her car, the door closing with a soft click. "Where to, ma'am?" the driver asked. She stared out into the night, her voice calm and steady. "Forward," she said. "Always forward." The car drove away, leaving behind the ruins of a family and the legend of a girl who rose from ashes to empire.